All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas, and uh, I do educational videos. Today we're doing, I believe this is video number 111 on the reciprocal system. The reciprocal system of theory is a theory of everything. It's a system of theory that was devised by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century up until his death in 1990. At the age of 92, I believe. And for about 60 years prior to that, he had been developing the system. He added first a period of induction that culminated in his fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. And then after that, a period of deduction where he began writing all his books. And his books came out mostly on the hard sciences. Today we're looking at his last book, which came out after he died in 1995, that focuses on metaphysics. It's called Beyond Space and Time. Now, the basic idea behind Larson's system is the reciprocal system, is that the universe is made entirely out of motion, not matter, not energy, but motion. Motion for Larson was the relationship between space and time. Space and time are the same, except that they are reciprocals of each other. They do not exist in and of themselves, only together in motion. And they, what qualities adhere to one adhere to the other. So space, we find it to be 3 or more dimensions. Time, therefore, is also 3 or more dimensions. Larson calls this coordinate space and coordinate time. And then time is flowing, progressing. It's always getting later and later. Therefore, too, space is flowing and progressing. Things are always getting farther and farther apart. Larson calls this clock time and clock space. And then space and time also only come in discrete units. There is a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. There's nothing less than that. If you go into less than 1 unit of space, you are in a realm of time. If you go into less than 1 unit of time, you are in a realm of space. And so there is no 1/2 unit or 0.32 units of anything having to do with space or time. All chemical phenomena, all physical phenomena are expressible exclusively in terms of time and space. Pressure is time over space to the 4th power. Mass is time to the 3rd power over space to the 3rd power. Speed, we know to be space over time. 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. The speed of light is not, as Einstein says, the maximum speed of the universe, but the speed of light is the midpoint or the null point or the origin of the universe, which makes sense. In a universe of motion, you always have motion. You do not ever have not motion. Larson also would sometimes refer to motion as change in 3 dimensions. He referred to it originally as space-time, then called it motion, but at the end he recognized that or at least articulated that what he's talking about is change in 3 dimensions. So we have a universe of change. It's always changing. And so even when things appear to be totally static, they're moving at the speed of light in all directions. Now, the speed of light then is the boundary between the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light, which Larson calls sector 2, or the cosmic sector, and the familiar universe that we know of that is moving slower than the speed of light, which Larson calls the material sector, or sector 1. Sector 1 grows and aggregates by bonding till it gets up to its most complex level, which is DNA. At that point, the DNA molecule becomes eligible to be controlled by a Sector 2 entity. The Sector 2 entity comes in and controls the overall entity in the same way that a thermostat controls a room. It's just a small part of that room, but it controls the whole environment. And when those two, Sector 1 and Sector 2, come together in such a way, in the right configuration, in the right ratio, it turns into the life unit, what Larson calls the life unit. Life is a combination of a material and cosmic structure. And then life grows and evolves over time from all the way from a single-celled organism all the way up to what Larson calls the intelligent human being or humanoid. And this being then becomes eligible to be controlled overall by an entity from what Larson calls Sector 3. Other people might call that God or Goddess or the gods or spirit or religious or numinous, but Larson calls it Sector 3, and this is a region that is independent of space and time or beyond space and time. Larson also calls it the metaphysical. This is the subject of his final book, Beyond Space and Time. Sector 3 communicates with human beings, intelligent human beings, through channels such as ESP, religious revelation, scientific insight, and intuition. And Sector 3 is nothing but good, no evil in Sector 3, and Sector 3 is always correct, and communicates that to us. Unfortunately, we are basically like single-celled spiritual organisms, and so we have a limited ability to understand and decode these messages. Now, that ability will increase over time and with practice and with preparation and with concentration, but right now we have a limited ability to get these messages right. And so that is kind of what the subject of this book is. Now, we are on the second to last chapter here, chapter 27, which is called Survival. And he's referring here to the survival of the soul. And was just talking about how we tend to very much anthropomorphize our religious deities and give them human characteristics, including all our foibles and the desire for the deity to punish something eternally for something. And he rejects that notion, saying that, Sector 3 doesn't work that way. You either have Sector 3 or you don't. If you don't have Sector 3, then you're just extinguished. There's no punishment. There's no eternal damnation. It's just over. It's just over. So he's going to go on from there. And so we will start right there. The concept of eternal punishment is repugnant to many thoughtful persons and a growing number of individuals, both within and without the religious organizations, have repudiated this idea without having anything concrete to take its place. The present study now discloses the existence of the kind of an alternate pattern of consequences that is needed, one which satisfies the general desire to see justice done without the harshness of the eternal punishment policy. Reward and punishment, we find, have no applicability to the survival situation. There is no need to weigh the individual's good deeds against his evil deeds and strike a balance. The judgment is automatic. If, at the time of death, there exists something capable of survival, it survives just as it then exists. If there is no Sector 3 structure to survive, nothing survives. Evil is not punished. It simply expires with the biological organism whose uncontrolled motivations produced it. A few observers have already recognized this as the logical and appropriate fate of the evildoer. One authority expresses his opinion thusly: I cannot see why the destiny of the undeviating sinner may not be, ought not to be, naked nothingness. Hell, so construed, would be merely zero. End quote. Back to Larson. We should recognize that there is no reason why the universe must conform to what the human race considers right and proper. But from the facts which were brought out in chapter 18, it is clear that a human consensus on simple matters of right or wrong, right and wrong, or any other moral subject that is easily within the grasp of the common man's intuitive powers is more than human. It is a human interpretation of information received from Sector 3 sources. It is quite significant, therefore, that the conclusions reached with respect to the ultimate fate of evil through a scientific process of deduction from factual premises satisfy the human criteria of just and proper action, complying with the accepted principle that evil should not triumph in the long run, while at the same time avoiding unreasonably harsh measures such as everlasting punishment. On this basis, it is material whether the good personality, the Sector 3 structure that survives, is of long standing or a relatively recent product. All what has occurred in the past is no longer of any consequence. All that matters is what now exists. This provides the answer to a question that has disturbed many persons, that of the relative standing of recent converts to good behavior as compared to that of lifelong adherents of high moral principles. The tendency in religious circles is to accord equal standing to the latecomers, a policy that is hard to reconcile with the coexisting doctrine of a final judgment based on an evaluation of one's actions during his lifespan. In the parable of the workers in the vineyard, for instance, those workers who started at the 11th hour were paid at the same wages as those who had worked all day. The latter are reported to have protested, and if we look at the situation from the wage or reward standpoint, it is clear that their protests were well-founded. The ecclesiastical attempts to rationalize this situation are singularly unconvincing. For example, one authority in his discussion of the parable describes the principles that will govern the distribution of rewards for service in this manner. As his laborers, we are guaranteed a full and just remuneration for our service, whether long or brief. That's number one. Number two, it is not for us to question his choice of laborers nor their respective reward. And number three, he retains to himself the privilege, the exercise of his goodness and grace, whatever might be thought of his generosity. End quote. There is not even an attempt at explanation or reconciliation in these or the similar comments that are made by other religious writers. We are simply told that any question is out of order. The only logical conclusion that we can draw from this attitude on the part of the religious authorities is that they cannot produce any rational explanation. This is quite understandable, since the equal treatment doctrine is irreconcilable with both the final judgment concept and with the wage concept in terms of which the parable is stated. Inclusion of this parable in the canonical text, in spite of the open contradictions which it introduces, suggests rather strongly that this is an item which has been received and accepted as an authentic revelation without any clear understanding of just what was being revealed. However, if we recognize that the structure that survives is that which exists at the time of death, and that whatever may have existed or may have been done prior to that time is irrelevant, the equal treatment accorded to the latecomers is entirely logical. According to our findings, there is no such thing as reward or remuneration for our services to religion. Indeed, the whole concept of ethical conduct as a labor or onerous task for which one should be compensated is itself inconsistent with the moral code. An ethical man under the direction of a control unit from Sector 3 does not find it burdensome to do the right thing. This is what he wants to do. The spiritual person is good. He is chaste or charitable, not because he desires to gain anything in this or the other world. It is his nature to be so. His goodness is motiveless. The finding that survival is contingent on the existence of an adequate Sector 3 structure makes it evident that deathbed repentance accomplishes nothing so far as survival is concerned. Something on the order of repentance may be a prerequisite for altering one's course of conduct and commencing the building of an ethical structure, but positive action is necessary for the actual construction. If no structure capable of survival has been erected before it is too late to take action, regretting this fact at the last moment will not change the situation. Nor does this scientific analysis give us any ground for believing that forgiveness or remission of sins by any religious power or agency would be any more effective. According to our findings, the record of the past is wiped clear in any event. Only the existing state of the Sector 3 structure has any significance. It should be noted, however, that the religious viewpoint can be regarded as having a real meaning if we apply it to situations other than those where death is imminent. Since only the good survives, if an individual turns over a new leaf and starts building a good moral character, whatever evil he has done previously will have no bearing on the final result, except to the extent that the habits developed during the past may make ethical conduct in the future more difficult. And thus, in effect, the past record is canceled. From the religious point of view, this can very well be expressed by the statement that his sins have been forgiven. It is clear that this view of the situation that we have derived from a scientific analysis rules out mercy, as this term is applied in religious circles. The destiny of each individual is determined according to the rules. That is, according to the nature of the ethical structure that he has built for himself, and there are no exceptions or deviations. But it should be realized that the religious concept of a merciful ruler and lawmaker is illogical in any event. Mercy, says the dictionary, implies compassion so great as to enable one to forbear punishing, even when justice demands it. And this is undoubtedly the sense in which this term is used in religious parlance. But such a concept is logically inapplicable to a lawgiver. A judge may show mercy to an offender by giving him a relatively light sentence where he could have imposed a heavier one. He may, for instance, specify 5 years imprisonment under circumstances where a sentence of 20 years would have been justified under the existing statutes. But the legislature would not be merciful if it amended the statutes to reduce the maximum sentence for this offense to 5 years. From that time on, anyone who receives a sentence of 5 years imprisonment for this particular offense is not receiving mercy. He is being punished to the full extent of the law. Justice no longer demands any greater punishment. The same considerations apply to the deity, as he is envisioned in the Western religious systems, a lawgiver as well as a ruler. Whatever change he may make in the application of the law is a change in the law itself. Those who have sufficient faith in the doctrines of their particular creed will be treated mercifully. Many religions assure us, but if it has not been decreed by the supreme authority that those who have this faith should be given preferential treatment, then they are entitled to this treatment under the law that has been promulgated. and in getting it, they are merely receiving justice, not mercy. Most persons seem to regard the religious promise of mercy as something special that relieves them of the penalties that are assessed against less favored individuals. But obviously, there must be some basis for the selection of the fortunate ones, and whatever this basis may happen to be, this is part of the law, the rules laid down by the lawgiver. The full text of that law includes a statement that the penalties do not apply or apply only in modified form to those who meet that requirement. The religious concepts of mercy, forgiveness, and the like are based on the assumption that each person must ultimately face a judgment in which he is held responsible for his actions during his lifetime. As brought out earlier, the findings of this work indicate that the record of past deeds has little or no bearing on the survival issue, regardless of whether that record is creditable or discreditable. Survival is determined by what one is, not by what one has done. Unless some positive action has been taken to build an ethical personality, an unblemished record of conduct is of no avail. Good conduct is not necessarily indicative of good character. Of course, the good can generally be relied upon to do good, or at least what they think is good. But we cannot reverse this statement and say that those who do good are good. Here, the question of motives is decisive. Okay, we'll leave it there and take over again here starting tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.